In 1971, a band that looked like they had no future suddenly created one of the most influential albums in rock history. That band was Alice Cooper, and the album was Love It to Death. Today, it's widely considered as one of the earliest examples of what would eventually become shock rock. But at the time, this record was something much simpler and much more desperate. It was a last chance. 2 albums had already failed commercially. The band had developed a reputation for bizarre stage shows, but the music industry still wasn't sure what to do with them. Then something happened that changed everything. A young producer named Bob Ezrin walked into their world and completely transformed the way the band sounded. The result was a record that gave them their first major hit, reshaped their musical identity, and launched a career that would last 5 more decades. Today we're celebrating the 55th anniversary of Love to Death. This is the story of the album that saved Alice Cooper. Before Love to Death, Alice Cooper was not a successful band, not even close. The group had formed in the late 1960s, originally coming out of Phoenix, Arizona, before relocating to Los Angeles. Their early music leaned heavily into psychedelic rock and experimental sounds. It was strange, chaotic, and sometimes intentionally bizarre. The first 2 albums, Pretty for You and Easy Action, were produced by Frank Zappa and released on Straight Records label. But commercially, they went nowhere. The records barely sold, and the band struggled to find an audience. Critics didn't understand them, radio stations didn't play them, and their theatrical stage antics, fake blood, bizarre costumes, and dark humor often confused audiences who expected something closer to the California rock scene at the time. By 1970, the label was starting to lose patience. The band needed something new, something sharper, something heavier, and that's when they crossed paths with the man who would change everything. The turning point came when the band met a young producer named Bob Ezrin. Ezrin was only in his early 20s, but he already had a reputation for discipline and musical structure. Where Alice Cooper was chaotic and theatrical, Ezrin was precise. Where the band loved experimentation, Ezrin believed in strong songwriting and tight arrangements. At first, the chemistry was strange. The band members were known for wild behavior and unpredictable ideas. Ezrin, on the other hand, treated the studio almost like a classroom. He pushed the band harder than anyone before. He made them rehearse relentlessly. He demanded tighter performances. And most importantly, he helped them focus their sound. Instead of psychedelic chaos, Ezrin encouraged the band to embrace something much more powerful, Detroit-style hard rock. Bands like the MC5 and the Stooges had already established that raw, aggressive style in Detroit.
Yes, kick out the tail!
And Alice Cooper found themselves drawn to that energy. Ezrin realized something crucial. The band didn't need to sound weird, they needed to sound dangerous. And the shift would define Love It to Death. Before recording began, the band started reshaping their identity. The guitars became heavier, the songs became more structured, the rhythms became tighter and more aggressive. This wasn't psychedelic rock anymore. This was the birth of a much darker style. The twin guitar attack from Glenn Buxton and Michael Bruce became the central element of the sound. Meanwhile, vocalist Alice Cooper, whose real name was Vincent Furnier, began leaning further into the character that would eventually define his career. He was sinister and sarcastic. He was the voice of teenage alienation. Ezrin encouraged all of it. But he also made sure the songs had hooks, because without strong songs, theatrics alone wouldn't save the band. And that's when one particular song started to take shape, a song that would change everything. The breakthrough came at the song I'm 18. At the time, rock music had plenty of love songs and rebellion anthems, but very few songs captured the confusion of being young. I'm 18 did exactly that. The lyrics captured a strange emotional space, being caught between childhood and adulthood, too old to be a kid, too young to be taken seriously. For millions of teenagers, the song hit home immediately. Musically, it was also different. The guitar riff was simple but powerful. The arrangement built slowly, creating tension before exploding onto the chorus. And Alice Cooper's vocal delivery sounded almost bored, frustrated, and sarcastic all at once. It felt authentic. When the single was released in the late 1970s, something incredible happened. It became a hit. The song climbed into the top 40, radio stations started playing Alice Cooper, and suddenly, the band that had been ignored for years finally had a momentum. That one song changed their entire future. With the success of I'm 18, the band returned to finish recording Love It to Death. Under Ezrin's leadership, the recording sessions became focused and intense. Ezrin demanded professionalism. He pushed the musicians to refine their performances again and again. Some band members later joked that working with him felt like going back to school, but the results were undeniable. The album sounded bigger, tighter, and far more powerful than anything the band had recorded before. Songs were carefully arranged, dynamics were emphasized, the guitars had weight, the rhythm section sounded locked in. And Alice Cooper's voice became the center of the entire production. The band finally sounded like a major rock act. Even beyond I'm 18, Love to Death contained several songs that would later become staples of Alice Cooper's career. One of them is It My Body? This track captured the band's growing sense of theatrical shock rock. The lyrics flirted with themes of sexuality and identity, while the music delivered a swaggering hard rock groove. It remains one of the band's most recognizable early songs. Another standout track is The Ballad of Dwight Fry. The song is particularly important because it foreshadowed the theatrical horror elements that would later define Alice Cooper's stage shows. The track tells the story of a man descending into madness inside a mental institution. Musically, it shifts between eerie, quiet moments and explosive rock sections. Live performances of the song often included dramatic stage acting, making it a fan favorite for decades. Then there's Long Way to Go. A high-energy rocker that captures the raw Detroit influence that shaped the album's sound. These songs demonstrated that the band had finally discovered its identity. They were dark and theatrical and heavy and very unique. When Love It to Death was released in 1971, it didn't just save the band's career, it created a blueprint. This album was the moment when Alice Cooper became more than just a band, it became a concept. The record blended hard rock with theatrical storytelling in a way that very few artists had attempted before. Later albums like Killer, School's Out, and $1 Billion Babies would push those ideas even further. But it all started here. Without Love to Death, the entire shock rock movement might have looked very different. Artists who came later, from horror-inspired metal bands to theatrical rock performers, owe something to this moment in 1971. The devil made me do it, I'll do it again. The back of my take it there. Green corpses lie, always face your Of course, this was the record that proved dark themes, theatrical imagery, and hard rock could coexist in a way that connected with mainstream audiences. Today, more than 5 decades later, Love to Death still stands as one of the most important early albums in Alice Cooper's career. It marked the first true collaboration with Bob Ezrin, a partnership that would produce many of the band's greatest works. It introduced the band to a national audience. And it gave them the first true anthem with I'm 18, but perhaps most importantly, it showed the world that Alice Cooper could become. They were a band that wasn't afraid to shock people, a band that combined rock music with theater. They were a band that would eventually become one of the most iconic names in rock history, and it all started with a record that almost didn't happen. So when we celebrate the 55th anniversary of Love It to Death, we're not just celebrating another classic rock album, we're celebrating a turning point, the moment a struggling band found the right producer, the right sound, and the right song exactly at the right time. Without this album, the legend of Alice Cooper might never have existed, but with it, shock rock was born and rock history was never quite the same again. And if you want to understand where it all began, this is the album to hear. This was actually my introduction to the classic Alice Cooper. I did a review of this album 5 years ago when it celebrated its 50th anniversary. And in that video, I talk more about my personal connection with the album, when I discovered it in a record store, and If you want to check that out, I'm going to put that video right here. It should be appearing on your screen right now. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Please like the video. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you're not already. I do rock and metal reviews and rankings and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.